This is going to be a little different from the typical stories you come across. I know there's no lack of tales about folks getting betrayed, caught off guard by someone they trusted, but my situation, it's not exactly that. See, I wasn't just the guy who got wronged in the end, I did some wronging too. But before you go ahead and label me just another bad guy, let me explain. I didn't get to that point on my own. I was pushed, pulled, and practically dragged into it. It wasn't entirely my doing. But, hey, let's take a step back. We've got to start somewhere, right? A little background won't hurt before we jump into the chaos. To begin with, I'm just your average man. Not a genius, not some action hero. I'm just a guy holding down a steady job, trying to make ends meet and keep some kind of balance in my life. I've never been the one to chase after drama. I'm reliable, maybe even predictable. That's who I've always been. My name doesn't really matter, but my wife's, let's call her Emily, now, she's another story. Emily was the kind of woman who turned heads. She had a presence, you know. Like she could step into a room, and everyone would be drawn to her. It wasn't just because she was stunning, though she was. It had more to do with how she carried herself, confident, sharp, always quick with her words. She had this magnetic energy that pulled people in. Hell, when we first met, I couldn't believe how effortless it all seemed for her. People just wanted to be around her, and why not? She was witty, charming, and had this contagious laugh that could brighten even the worst day. Her sense of humor, now, that was something else. She could roast you, cut you down with a single line, and somehow, you'd still be laughing by the end of it. It was like magic. Everyone adored her for it, her friends, our families, even my buddies. And I'll admit, in the beginning, I was captivated by it too. But over time, that same humor started to wear thin on me. It's tough to laugh when the joke's always on you, you know. She was the comedic one in our relationship. Me. I was the serious guy, the one who kept everything in line, making sure we stayed grounded. And for a while, that worked. She brought the excitement, and I kept things from spinning out of control. But that humor, it came back to haunt me. It pulled one hell of a dirty trick on me. So cruel, so twisted that I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't lived through it. And you won't either, not until you hear what went down. It was just an ordinary evening, nothing special. I came home from work, wiped out like usual. The daily grind was getting to me, but that's just how it goes, right? You work, you come home, eat, sleep, and do it all over again. But that night, when I walked through the door, the house smelled inviting, cozy. Dinner was already on the table, something Italian, I think. She knew I loved pasta, so she'd make it on nights when she was in a good mood. The candles were lit, Emily loved setting the right mood. And there she was, smiling like everything was perfect, like nothing in the world was wrong. We sat down for dinner, chatting like always, just the usual stuff. I asked her about her day, and she asked me about mine. She laughed at something dumb I said. That laugh, that damn laugh. I remember thinking everything was fine. I wasn't paying much attention to her mood. I was too busy shoveling food into my mouth, trying to shake off the stress of the day. But as the conversation continued, something shifted in the atmosphere. At first, it was subtle, just a change in how she was sitting, the way her voice dipped a bit. I noticed her leaning back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly. And then she hit me with it, completely out of the blue. You know, she began, her tone as casual as if she were talking about the weather, I've been feeling a little tired of us lately. I looked up from my plate, bewildered, wondering if I had misheard her. Tired? I repeated, my fork frozen in midair. What do you mean, tired? She sighed, as though this was the most routine conversation in the world. I don't know. It's just, things feel a bit stagnant, like we're stuck in place, you know. I didn't know. I was blindsided. We weren't fighting, there wasn't some deep rut we were stuck in, at least not that I could see. Sure, we had our routines, but I thought we were fine. 7 years of marriage, and I figured we had it all worked out by now. Apparently, I was dead wrong. So wrong. And then she dropped the real bombshell. So. I slept with someone, she said, completely straight-faced, like it was no big deal, like she was telling me she bought a new jacket or changed her hairstyle. It made me feel better. But don't worry, I'm not going to do it again. I couldn't process it. My brain just stopped. Everything inside my head went quiet. Her words hung in the air like some sick joke that hadn't landed yet. Did she just say that? Did she just tell me, over dinner, that she cheated on me, so casually, like it was nothing? My mouth went dry. My hands tightened around the fork, and I could feel the metal bending under the pressure, but I didn't care. I just stared at her, searching for some sign that she was messing with me, that this was one of her dumb pranks. But there was nothing in her expression, just cold, detached indifference. And then, like she hadn't just torn my world apart, she stood up, walked over to me, and kissed me on the lips. A quick, meaningless peck. "Good night," she said softly. And without another word, she turned and walked to the bedroom, leaving me there, utterly frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think straight. I looked down at my hands and realized I had bent the damn fork in half. My chest was tight, and all I could feel was rage building inside me, consuming every part of me. But instead of going after her, instead of demanding answers, I just stayed there, fists clenched, my mind spinning with one thought: revenge. She thought she could just drop that bombshell, kiss me, and go to bed like nothing happened. Like I wasn't supposed to react. Oh, I was going to react all right. I was going to make her regret ever saying a word. But how could I have known it was all a joke? How was I supposed to predict that her twisted sense of humor would go this far? As soon as she kissed me and walked off to the bedroom like it was nothing, a surge of anger ignited in me. I couldn't just sit there and stew. Not with my thoughts spiraling out of control. So, without hesitation, I grabbed my jacket, threw it on, and stormed out of the house. I needed space. I needed air, room to clear my head. But more than that, I needed someone to talk to. My first instinct was to call my closest buddy, the guy I'd usually turn to when things fell apart. But as I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb stopped on someone else's name, my wife's friend. Let's call her Jessica. Now, Jessica wasn't just some random friend of Emily's. I'd known her longer than I'd known my wife. We used to hang out in the same circles, long before Emily and I ever became a thing. And, to be honest, there had always been something between Jessica and me. Nothing serious, but I knew she liked me back then, before Emily and I got together. It was just one of those situations where the timing was never right. But deep down, I had a feeling her emotions hadn't entirely faded. Without thinking it through, I called her. She picked up after a couple of rings, sounding surprised, but not unpleasantly. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, her tone casual, like we hadn't gone months without talking. "Can you meet me?" I blurted out. "At the bar near your place?" I need to talk." There was a brief pause, but she didn't ask any questions. "Sure. I'll be there in 10. That was it, no interrogation, no prying. She just agreed, like she knew something was wrong. So, without giving it much thought, I dialed her number. She answered after a couple of rings, sounding a bit surprised, but not in an unpleasant way. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked, her tone casual, like we hadn't gone months without talking. "Can you meet me?" I blurted out. "At the bar near your place?" I need to talk." There was a brief pause, but she didn't press for details. "Sure, I'll be there in 10. That was it, no grilling me about why I needed to talk or what was happening. She just agreed, like she could sense something wasn't right. I jumped into my car and headed toward the bar, my mind still spinning from everything that had just gone down at home. When I arrived, I saw her right away. She was already seated in a booth, sipping a drink. Jessica looked up as I walked in, her eyebrows slightly raised in surprise. "Where's Emily?" she asked, her tone casual at first. I sat down, sidestepping her question. "She's not coming," I replied flatly. That caught her attention. She leaned forward, her expression shifting from casual to concerned. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." We ordered a couple of drinks, and once the alcohol started to take effect, the words just poured out of me. I told her everything, what Emily had said, how she casually admitted she'd cheated like it was nothing, and how it had shattered me. At first, Jessica couldn't believe it. I could see the shock, the disbelief, in her eyes. But as she listened, I watched her start to realize I wasn't joking. It was all sinking in. We kept drinking, and as the conversation got heavier, the alcohol dulled the sharp edges of my anger. But it was still there, simmering beneath the surface. By the time the bartender called for last orders, we were both pretty tipsy. Out of nowhere, Jessica leaned in closer and said, "I've got another bottle of wine at my place, if you want to keep this going." I didn't even have to think about it. I nodded, and we left the bar together. Her apartment was just a short walk from the bar. We stumbled in, laughing about something I can't even remember now. But the moment we cracked open that bottle of wine, I knew exactly where the night was heading. There was a look in her eyes, a certain intensity, and I wasn't going to stop it. I didn't want to. It didn't take long. After a few more drinks, things escalated. One minute we were talking, the next we were on her couch, hands all over each other, lips locked. In that moment, I decided to do something I hadn't planned on. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Not the whole thing, just short clips here and there. Jessica noticed, of course, and at first, she wasn't having it. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a bit slurred but still sharp. She pushed my hand away. "It's just for me," I said quickly, trying to reassure her. "No one else will ever see it, I swear. It'll be fine." She hesitated for a moment but eventually gave in. Alcohol, lust, and years of unresolved feelings can do that, I guess. So I kept filming, just enough to satisfy whatever twisted part of me thought this was a good idea. After it was over, I sat up, feeling the weight of what had just happened. I told her I had to go. She looked at me, disappointed. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of hurt. "Yeah, I should," I said, already overwhelmed with guilt. "It's late." She wanted me to stay, I could tell, but I wasn't about to spend the night in her bed. This wasn't going to turn into something regular, and there was no way I was going to complicate my life any further by sticking around. So, I left. I called a cab, and as I sat in the back seat, my head spinning from the alcohol and what had just happened, I couldn't shake the strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. I'd done it. I'd gotten my revenge. But did it make me feel any better? No, not really. If anything, I just felt empty, like the night had momentarily filled a void that was still very much there, and nothing had actually changed. When I got home, it was late. The house was dark, and Emily was probably fast asleep in the bedroom, completely oblivious to everything that had happened. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my mind racing, trying to process it all. And then, without a word, I walked over to the couch and crashed there for the night. The next morning, the tension in the air was thick. You know that suffocating silence that just screams something is wrong? Yeah, that's what it felt like. I tried to brush it off as I dragged myself into the kitchen, half expecting Emily to be her usual self, cheerful and acting like nothing had happened. But no. She was sitting at the table, her eyes narrowed, lips pressed tightly together as she scrolled through her phone. She didn't even glance up when I walked in, just sipped her coffee. But I could tell she was angry. Not the explosive kind of angry, this was the quiet, simmering rage that made it clear she was waiting for the right moment to let it all out. I sat down across from her, pretending not to notice, but I could feel her gaze drilling into the back of my head. We sat in silence for a few minutes before she finally spoke, her voice dripping with irritation. "So," she said, dragging the word out slowly. "Where were you last night? You came home so damn late, and you didn't even come to bed." I could feel her watching me, waiting for an explanation. But I wasn't in the mood for her questions. Still, I knew I couldn't dodge this one. But this time, I wasn't going to lie. She'd started this whole mess, after all. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "I was out," I said flatly, giving her as little as possible to work with. "Needed some space to think." Her eyes narrowed further, and she put down her phone, locking her attention on me. "Think about what?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were up to something." I glanced at her, a small smirk pulling at the corner of my mouth. "Yeah, I was thinking about us. About how I'm kind of tired of our relationship too." That took her by surprise. She blinked a few times, her brows furrowing in confusion. "Wait, what? You're tired? Since when?" I shrugged, keeping my tone casual, like it didn't matter, even though we both knew it did. "For a while now, I guess. And last night," I paused, letting the tension grow between us. "I did something about it." Her face didn't change at first. She just looked confused, like she thought I was messing with her. Then she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and smirked, like she'd caught me in a lie. "Oh, really? You did something about it? What exactly did you do? Cheat on me?" I stared right at her and nodded. "Yeah. I did." The smirk stayed on her face, but her eyes were searching mine, trying to figure out if I was serious. "Oh, come on," she said, letting out a short laugh. "You're joking. Is this your way of getting back at me for what I said last night?" I didn't break eye contact. "I'm not joking, Emily. I cheated on you." Her smile faltered, but only for a brief second. "Sure, you did. With who? The bartender? Some random girl from work?" I took a deep breath, knowing exactly what this would do to her. "No, not some random girl. It was Jessica. That did it." Her smile vanished completely, replaced by sheer disbelief. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't quite process the words I had just said. "Wait, what? Jessica? My Jessica? Are you serious right now?" I didn't flinch. "Yeah, I slept with her last night." She blinked, then burst out laughing, but this time it wasn't out of amusement. It was a nervous, disbelieving laugh. "Oh my God, you're kidding, right? You have to be. Jessica. That's your big confession. What kind of sick joke is this?" I didn't say a word. I just calmly reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the video. I pressed play and held it up for her to see. She looked at the screen, still grinning, still convinced this was some elaborate prank. But as the video played and Jessica's face came into view, her smile began to falter. Then the sound kicked in, our voices, the unmistakable noise of what had happened, and her expression changed entirely. Her face went pale, her eyes widening in shock. Her hand shot up to her mouth, and before I could react, she slapped the phone out of my hand with enough force to send it clattering across the table. "You bastard," she screamed, her voice breaking as she stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled over. "You absolute idiot. You slept with Jessica. You're out of your mind." I stood up, my own anger surging to match hers. "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy. What about you, huh? You're the one who cheated first." You don't get to act like the victim here. She glared at me, her eyes wild, her breath coming in shallow bursts. I didn't cheat on you, you idiot. It was a joke. I froze. Her words echoed in my head, but I couldn't process them at first. A joke? What are you talking about? She threw her hands up in frustration, pacing the kitchen like she was ready to explode. I said it to mess with you. I was kidding, you moron. I didn't sleep with anyone. I was going to tell you once you calmed down, but you stormed out of the house before I could explain anything. The room started to spin. My mind struggled to catch up with what she was saying. A joke? You were joking. Yes, she screamed, tears filling her eyes. I was joking. I never cheated on you. But you just went and slept with Jessica. And filmed it. How the hell am I supposed to react to that? It felt like the ground had fallen out from under me. All the anger, all the justification I had built up inside myself, crumbled in an instant. I stood there, my mouth dry, my heart racing, realizing just how badly I had messed everything up. Emily, I said softly, reaching for her. I didn't know. She cut me off, her voice breaking. I don't want to hear it. You've done enough. Tears streamed down her face now, and she looked more devastated than I had ever seen her. You ruined everything. You slept with my best friend. How am I supposed to forgive that? I had no words. Nothing I could say would fix this. I didn't know, I repeated weakly, but the words felt empty. Useless. She shook her head, stepping away from me. Just leave. I don't want to see you right now. With that, she stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I heard the lock click, followed by the sound of her sobbing. I stood there in the kitchen, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. I wanted to fix it, to apologize, but what could I do? I had messed up badly, and now there was no undoing it. After Emily locked herself in the bedroom, I knew I couldn't just sit around and hope things would magically resolve. The guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't shake the image of her face, the shock, the hurt, but somehow, I was still angry. Angry that she had made such a stupid joke in the first place, that she'd pushed me to this. So I grabbed my jacket and headed straight to Jessica's place. I had to tell her everything. When I got there, Jessica opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw me, at least for a moment. I didn't waste time with small talk. I laid it all out, from the moment Emily made her joke to the second I showed her the video. And as I talked, I watched Jessica's expression shift from confusion to fury. You're such a jerk, she spat, crossing her arms, her face hardening. You set me up. You didn't tell me this was all about some twisted revenge plan. What the hell is wrong with you? I fired back, my own frustration rising to the surface. You agreed to it, didn't you? You knew what was going on. Yeah, I agreed because I thought it was just between us, she yelled, pacing around her living room, her hands flailing. I had no idea you were using me to get back at Emily. Do you even realize what you've done? I've lost my best friend because of you. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. It's not all on me, Jessica. You were there. You knew what was happening. You're just as guilty. She stopped in her tracks and shot me a fierce glare. You really are something else, you know that? I've been in love with you since college, and this is how you repay me. By ruining my life. Her words hit me hard, like a gut punch. I had no idea she still had feelings for me, not like that. For a moment, all the anger between us seemed to fade, replaced by a heavy silence. We both just sat down on her couch, staring at the floor, trying to process everything. After a few minutes, Jessica let out a long sigh and pulled out her phone. I'm going to try calling Emily. Maybe I can explain. Help her understand. I don't know, something. She dialed, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again, but Emily wasn't answering. By this point, I didn't know if she ever would. Desperation began to set in. I felt like I was drowning, and no matter what I did, I couldn't pull myself out. I left Jessica's place after a while and went back home, hoping to talk things through with Emily, to apologize, to fix this disaster. But when I walked through the door, the first words out of her mouth were, "I've already called a lawyer." She didn't even look at me, her voice cold and detached. "I'm filing for divorce." I felt my stomach drop. It was like the ground had disappeared beneath me, and I was free-falling with no end in sight. "Emily, please," I started, but she didn't want to hear it. "There's nothing more to say," she cut me off, her back to me as she folded laundry, like it was just any other day. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I stood there for a moment, scrambling to find something to say, but there was nothing. I felt completely worthless. I had lost her. There was no coming back from this, so I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to Jessica's place. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I asked if I could stay with her for a while. She hesitated, her eyes scanning my face, full of frustration and doubt. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said at first, crossing her arms again. I couldn't blame her. I had dragged her into this mess too. She had her own issues to deal with now. But as I turned to leave, feeling defeated, she called me back. "Wait," she said, softer this time. "All right, fine. You can stay, but just for a little while. This whole thing, it's a lot." And so I stayed with Jessica. The divorce process dragged on for about a month, and during that time, our entire social circle knew what had happened. Emily made sure of that. She told everyone, every little detail, and our friends quickly took sides. Some stayed neutral, but most of them sided with her. I couldn't blame them. During that time, Jessica and I started spending more time together. What had begun as a mistake, something fueled by anger and bad decisions, slowly evolved into something else. We tried to date, to make sense of our new situation, but the more we tried, the more we realized that something wasn't right. There was this huge gap between us, like we were both too broken, too out of place for anything to work. She still had feelings for me, sure, but those feelings were now tainted by everything that had happened. I could feel it too. We tried to act like things were normal, but nothing was. Every time I looked at her, I couldn't shake the guilt of what we'd done. Every time she smiled, it felt forced, like she was trying to convince herself that this was okay. But deep down, we both knew it wasn't. I felt stuck in limbo, trapped between the wreckage of my marriage and this fragile new relationship with Jessica that didn't feel real. As the days passed, it became more and more obvious that no matter how hard we tried to move forward, neither of us could escape the mess we had created. We were both out of place, and I had no idea where to go from here. Update. It's been a while since everything went down, and I figured I owe you all an update. After all the chaos with Emily, the divorce, and that whole disaster with Jessica, I've had some time to reflect. I've grown up a lot more than I ever thought I would. Honestly, Jessica and I, well, we tried to make it work for a while. We had history, sure, and for a brief moment, it felt like maybe we could turn something messy into something meaningful. But the truth is, it just wasn't right. We grew up together in more ways than one, and for a time, we were each other's support system while everything was falling apart. But you know what really killed it? Our so-called friends. The constant judgment from everyone around us was relentless. People loved to talk, to point fingers like they're somehow better or above it all. They whispered behind our backs, made snide remarks, and acted like we were some scandal they could gossip about at every opportunity. It was exhausting, and eventually, it all just became too much. Jessica and I sat down one night, after yet another awkward encounter with one of her friends, and we both knew. We knew this wasn't going to work, not with all the baggage, not with everyone's opinions hanging over us like a dark cloud. So, we made the decision to end it. There wasn't some huge fight or dramatic breakup. We just let it go, for both our sakes. Now, I'm in a different place, both literally and figuratively. I've made the decision to move to another city. I'm packing up my things, getting ready to leave this town and all the memories behind. It's strange, but it feels like the right move, like I need to escape the mess and the people who won't let me forget what happened, and just start over. I want a clean slate. No more judgmental stares, no more baggage from the past weighing me down. It's terrifying, I won't lie. But there's something about a fresh start that gives me hope. Maybe this time, I can figure out who I really am without all the mistakes and bad decisions hanging over my head. I'm not saying it'll be easy, nothing ever is, but it's a step in the right direction. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm ready for it. Here's to new beginnings. Update. Well, here I am, already settled into a new city. It's amazing how fast things can change once you decide to leave the past behind. I found a job pretty quickly too. I'm working in an office now, doing something completely different from what I used to. It's nothing glamorous, just basic administrative work with a bit of project management thrown in. It's steady, and honestly, after everything I've been through, the simplicity is kind of refreshing. I clock in, do my job, and clock out. No drama, no stress, just the usual daily routine. And for now, that's all I need. But of course, life always has a way of surprising you. There's this woman at work, let's call her Rachel. She's the type of person who lights up a room, but not in an over-the-top kind of way. There's just something about her. She's got this quiet confidence, you know. And she's incredibly smart and doesn't take nonsense from anyone. I catch myself looking at her more often than I should, and I think she's noticed, but I haven't said anything yet. How could I? I'm still carrying all this emotional baggage from my past, the divorce, the fallout with Jessica, it's all still there, lurking in the back of my mind. I can't help but feel guilty, like I don't deserve a second chance. Part of me feels like I need to make peace with my past before I even think about moving forward with someone else. So here I am, stuck in this weird limbo. I really like Rachel, but I don't know how to tell her. I keep wondering, what if I screw it up again? What if I'm still too damaged to make this work? I guess that's why I'm asking you all, what would you do in my shoes? Would you take the risk or wait it out until you're sure the past won't sabotage things? Anyway, I just wanted to check in and thank you for sticking with me through all of this. Your support has meant more than I can express. I'm still figuring things out, but it feels good to know there are people out there who've got my back. Here's hoping I can turn this around and make something good come out of all this. Update. I figured it was time for another update, and this one's a bit different from the last. I'm in a relationship now with that girl from work, Rachel. Things are going well, better than I anticipated, honestly. I took my time, though. I didn't rush into anything because I wanted to be sure I was ready. I've been seeing a therapist for a while now, really putting in the work to process all the emotions and heartache from everything that happened with Emily and Jessica. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. The thing is, I realized I can't keep punishing myself for my past. Yeah, I made some serious mistakes, and yeah, it's taken a lot of effort to come to terms with them. But I'm starting to feel like I'm finally moving forward, like I deserve another chance. And Rachel, she's been patient, understanding, and just great. She knows all about my past, and while I was nervous to tell her at first, she didn't judge me for it. That's something rare. One thing that hasn't changed, though. I never did develop much of a sense of humor. Maybe it's just not in the cards for me. But I've learned to accept it. We joke about it sometimes, especially since Rachel has this lightheartedness about her that I admire. Maybe that's enough for both of us. Anyway, I just wanted to give you all an update. I'm in a much better place now, and it feels good to finally say that. Thank you for sticking with me through everything. Wishing you all the best, and good luck wherever life takes you.